Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Author Etiquette. Today, we have Andrew G. Nielsen, and we've had some technical difficulties in the past, but I think we finally squared it away. It was mostly on my end, and if AT&T falls flat on its face this time, I shall yank ye out of my house. That I can promise. So, if you all don't know Andrew, you should, he is a retired NYPD officer with many years of experience. And he writes some great novels around crime, fiction, and things like that. So introduce yourself to the folks and tell us what you do.
Well, my name is Andrew G. Nelson, and I'm a retired NYPD officer. I spent 20 years with the NYPD, rose up through the ranks to detective and sergeant, and retired back in the early 2000s, moved out to the Midwest. And since 2013, I've been writing books and currently have about 15 of them.
Wow, that's if you guys can't tell, he is from New York. Just listen to the accent.
Yeah.
You know what? I've been all over the world, and there's a couple accents I don't think people can get rid of. And I think
No.
one of them is New York
Yeah.
City in particular, right? I don't. That and some really harsh Germans when they, like Dr. Ruth and stuff, when they speak like,
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I've been retired for 20 years now, and I still haven't apparently lost the accent, which causes a little bit of confusion when I'm ordering out here.
They go, what? Get subtitles. No, but great. So tell us about your latest book or your series of books.
Well, my series of books started off with the James Maguire series, and I took a different path than some writers do. Actually, when I was writing my second book, my first book was Perfect Pawn, which for somebody with a New York accent is probably not the greatest title for a book, because I've had some people look at me and go, "Excuse me?" And I'm like, "No, it's pawn, like the chess piece."
Well, you know what? I'd go, it's pawn.
Excuse me. And when I was writing my sequel to it, Queen's Gambit, I had decided that I had this idea in my mind, and I wanted to write like a short story for my readers to carry them through until I completed, Queen's Gambit. So I wrote up this little treatise. I gave it to my wife, and she read it, and she said, "No, this is a great character. You really have to write this into a book." So I kind of had to take a break from what I was doing to expand on that short story that I wrote. And that turned into the Alex Taylor series. Now, James Maguire and Alex Taylor were partners back in New York City. So I actually have two series running concurrently. And the character track mirrors each other as they go through. So the books, each of the main characters makes appearances in the other series.
Cool.
So it could be a little bit confusing,
Right.
kind of along the lines of Robert Parker when he had the LAPD guy, Jesse Stone, and then had a romantic interest. So, but it follows track with them, and it just makes for a very interesting story because you get to see the perspective from each individual character.
Yes, and I think it may be somebody that's reading the one series, the character, where else can I find this character? Where can I take him up at and be able to continue that series? It may be an end to the other books,
Right?
Or V. And I think that's probably pretty smart, actually, when you think about that. Do all the books take place in New York City?
They all do. Well, no, let me take that back. The first one, Maguire is a retired detective. And the premise of that story is that his former high school girlfriend goes missing from a one-car accident up in upstate New York, where that's his hometown. So he goes back up there looking to help with the search for the woman. When he gets up there, he realizes no one's looking for her. And that starts him down this path of trying not only to find her, but to figure out why her disappearance is basically just being glossed over. Now, her husband is the sheriff of the town, which makes it even a little bit more interesting of why he's not looking for his wife. And the Alex Taylor series, Alex, like I said, Alex was partners with Maguire, and she's had a rough road that she's gone down. And her shot at redemption occurs when Maguire gets to the job as chief of police in a small town in upstate New Hampshire. And so she's the chief of police. And it kind of was one of those things because my background is with the NYPD. Obviously, I
Mm-hmm.
spent 20 years with them, but I also did 2 years with a small county sheriff's office.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to see things from two different perspectives. The
Right.
NYPD is basically a, homogenous department. We have
Oh yeah.
everything at our disposal. And then you get to these smaller departments and they don't have access to many of the things we do. So
Mm-hmm.
the two books, you get to see things from different perspectives. But with Maguire, after Perfect Pawn, everything takes place in New York City.
Okay.
And the reader gets to see an insight into the NYPD that they probably would never have seen before.
Right. Yeah, because it is a self-contained police organization. I mean, they've got anti-terrorists. They go all over the world and look, do they bomb disposal, detectives, everything. I mean, it's
Yeah,
self-contained.
yeah.
It's a yeah, definitely. I don't even think they probably call in the state police or FBI much, unless it's a federal thing.
Not really. I mean, and the NYPD is led with many firsts. We had the first aviation unit. We had the first actual SWAT team. I know LAPD likes to, take that mantle, but
Right.
our emergency service goes back to the 1920s. So we've had a lot of firsts,
Oh
and
wow.
yeah, so we're self-contained. Whatever we need, we have.
Mm-hmm. Do you miss it?
I do. Well, I shouldn't say that. I miss the clowns. I don't miss the circus.
Yeah.
Had a had a lot of great
Not right
times.
now. Not
Huh?
right now. Oh my God.
No, no. Well,
Oh,
see, I came on in the 80s, and
oh,
the
that was
one thing I
Dinkins,
will
right?
say, huh?
Is that Dinkins around that
Yes.
time or Koch or whatever?
I came on with Koch, and then Dinkins
Yeah.
came after him.
Yeah.
And it was rough back then. But
Mm-hmm.
the one thing I'll say is we had the support of the people. That doesn't seem to be the case now. So it's basically a double-edged sword. You've got not only the spikes in crime, but also a little bit of resentment from people. And I wouldn't want to be back there now.
I can't figure that out for the life of me. You know, I don't know. You know, why? I mean, they're the first people that people call that hate you will be the
Right.
police
Yeah.
and expect you to be there before they even call. I
Right.
mean, yeah, it's crazy, crazy.
But with that being said, the current book that I'm working on is called tentatively titled Exposed King.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's part of the Maguire series. And this actually, I started writing this at the outline of it back during COVID. So we go back a number of years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very timely for what's going on now in policing and in cities at large. And so I'm kind of, trying to get this book out
Mm-hmm.
without rushing it and ruining it. But a
Right.
lot of the topics that you're seeing going on today, I was writing about early on and had come up with this entire outline of a book. And now I'm looking at what's going on in the world and I'm going, I really do need to get this book out.
I think a lot of authors struggle with that when they write fiction that's so close to reality,
Hmm.
and they're able to look at world events or things are going on and think about something of what if, and that what if actually becomes happens. I mean, it's not a what if anymore. I think a lot of authors are trying, get those books out, especially with, terrorism or the police activity, or they try to get the geopolitical things. They try to get the book out
Hmm.
very, very quickly. So yeah, I can see that definitely happening. That's why I write historical fiction. Not much is good.
You don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Well, unless it comes true again, then we're all screwed.
Hmm.
So good luck on that. What else? Have you ever thought about writing something else? I mean, is that ever kind of like maybe dip my toes in, this or any kind of other things, or you just stick strictly to your genre?
No, actually, I don't. Like I said, I have the Maguire series,
Yeah.
I have the Alex Taylor series, and then I started doing novellas under the title of NYPD Cold Case. And so
Okay.
I introduced a new character called Angelo Antonucci.
Mm-hmm.
But those books take place in the world of Maguire. Although
Oh,
they're standalone,
right.
Maguire is also still a central character in those. and then Antonucci comes into play in the Maguire series. So I'm kind of
That's
melding.
kind of cool how you did married all those together and kind of meld them together, but separate.
Yeah. And then I actually, because I grew up on science fiction and whatnot, and I had an idea come to me one day of trying basically to incorporate science fiction paranormal into a police procedural. So I ended up writing a book called Awakening. And basically what it is, it's like NYPD Blue meets Twilight, but without the annoying kids. So it's adult
So
themed.
it's enjoyable.
It's enjoyable, yes. And I've had a lot of feedback that's come in saying it was a great take on the vampire category. But basically, what I did was, what if vampires were real and brought them into this world and meshed it with a police procedural with a detective? And while it's set in New York, it's not part of the other series. It's a standalone, and it's been very interesting to write that because you get that one aspect of the paranormal, and then you get the police procedural. So I enjoy writing that, and I've also written a couple of nonfiction books. One of
Okay.
which was called "Where Was God" on 9/11, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of taken from my own experiences of that day,
Yep. Yep.
and also looking into, because the question I got a lot after 9/11 was, where was God?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a reasonable question when, anytime you go through a
Oh
national
yeah. Yeah.
tragedy like that, you say, how could it happen?
Right.
And so as I was writing the book, it took me about 5 years, and I was going back and forth with it and having a lot of hard time
Mm-hmm.
trying to, sit down and do this book. And then
Yep.
I ended up getting cancer attributed to 9/11. And all of a sudden I had a dog in a fight. And
Oh wow.
so, yeah. So I started under the premise of, if you're going to try to blame God or ask where was God, then
Mm-hmm.
you have to basically prove whether God exists or not. And so,
Mm-hmm.
where was God turned into a cold case investigation on Jesus Christ. And so,
Well, that's interesting.
yeah, it really, it hit to the foundation as I was
Right.
writing it. But when you look at it, I had one reviewer come back and said that he had read The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, and he felt that it was lacking. And then when he read my book, he said it sounded like a trial attorney putting on a case, and an actual case for Christ with it. So that was one of the
That's
reviews that I
interesting.
got that meant a lot.
That's very interesting, especially when you, in the middle of writing it, you have a something that happens because you were doing writing because something happened to you, then something happened to you because you're there. It's it's kind of it's like a whole quagmire type thing, I guess, or something. It's crazy how that happens. Wow, that's crazy. But everything's good now.
It's good. Yep. Yeah. That's one of the things I don't think people realize, not getting off track. But with 9/11, everybody's aware of what happened on that day. But the lesser known fact is how many of us, the first
Oh yeah.
responders that day, have gotten sick as a result of the toxins down there. So it's something to bring out to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we recognize the heroes that died on 9/11, but hundreds more have died and thousands more are sick from
Oh
everything
yeah.
down there. So,
Yeah. I mean that people go into that toxic fumes without any kind of a or, face protection or mouth or mask now or then, and now somebody coughs, you throw a mask on, you're like, what the hell? I mean,
right.
it's just I don't know, but yeah, you hear about that. I do. I watch a lot, TV and everything, and just the after effects of the recovery effort
Hmm.
is. I mean, again, thousands of people will be affected, even if maybe they weren't in the recovery, but they were downwind or they were exposed to all the toxins and because everything in that building, right? I mean, you had asbestos in there. You had because built in what the 60s and 70s. You had everything in there that came crumbling, and all that turned to dust.
Yeah. And
So,
and the sad thing is, we're not talking about, buildings out in the middle of nowhere.
No,
They were in
exactly.
the heart, basically, of Manhattan. And
Yeah.
so there was no way really of closing it all down. I mean, you can't just shutter lower Manhattan and say, okay, that's a day. So you've had, they tried to get things back to normal as
Mm.
quickly as they could, but in the process, they were allowing people to go back in and just expanding the exposure to people. You had the financial district down there. You've got so much in
Everything's
terms
down
of
there.
occupancy. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, all those people, not just the first responders, because we're going to do what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you had civilians moving back in there, and they're getting sick too. And so
Oh
it
yeah.
really is
They're
sad.
covered with dust.
Yeah. Everything was
Yeah.
covered with dust.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. That's crazy. So you ever thought about writing a book about the response of it?
No, because I think that's been covered.
Has it?
Um, uh, and so, where was God was kind of like my personal journey. Even though as a Christian, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus Christ. It was still a question of, how could something like this happen?
Yeah.
But then when you get deeper into the scriptures and you
Mm-hmm.
start looking at things, you get a different perspective. It's not a question of where was God. God's been where he's always been. The
Mm-hmm.
question is, what have we as human beings done? I
Yeah.
mean, we've taken a blessing and we've basically created this world that is failing, and then we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to blame someone, which is the human condition. I mean, it's very
Right.
hard to actually accept responsibility for
Yeah.
things we do.
Well, look at government.
Yeah, very true. It's not us.
You'll see them do it, and they'll say, "I didn't do it." You're like,
It
"I
was it
saw
was
you."
it was funny because I actually saw a post the other day, and it was the national debt and broken down by individual and by
Yeah.
family how much you owe. And my
Oh yeah.
reply was, I owe AT&T, I owe my electric bill. I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't my debt.
Yeah.
I'm
I didn't
living
cure that.
responsibly.
Matter of fact, they're taxing what I'm paying. What I'm getting paid, they're taxing.
Yeah.
Again and again, double taxation. If you're on Social Security, it's double taxation. You already got taxed on the money, so that's crazy. So when do you think your the new book's going to come out? I mean, you said you're not trying to rush it, but
I'm really trying to push for before the end of the year or at least the early part of 2025.
okay.
I've got about a third of it to two-thirds of it done already.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how your process is with writing,
Yeah.
but before I ever sit down to actually begin writing on a book, I have to do an outline. And like I
Okay.
said, this outline was done back during COVID. So
Right.
I have the entire book outlined and I know where I'm going. So it's just a matter of sitting down and actually doing uh, the writing aspect of it. And like I said, I'm between a third and two-thirds of the way through. So I'm hoping that I can get this out very soon.
Yeah, I do a very high level outline. Normally the title. But I mean, know the ending, and I know the beginning, and I know what I want to put in the book normally. Um, but I've tried outlining. I just can't do it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe ADD or I don't know what it is.
It's
Just
not
can't do it.
easy, and I know there's two schools with this.
Yeah.
One has to outline, and the other one is just like let it rip. We'll figure out where we're going.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, and I have so many characters that I've developed over all of these books,
Oh yeah. Keeping track of them.
and keeping track of it is hard. And
Yeah.
so I need to have that ability to go because there'll be times, and I'm sure as a writer, you experience the same thing. You'll sit down and there's nothing there.
Right.
And you're like, it'll be days or weeks. And I've
Yeah.
gone months where I'm just not feeling it. So
Yep.
for me, the outline kind of keeps me on track. So
Mm-hmm.
even if I come back to it after a couple of weeks, I can
Mm-hmm.
actually go right to that outline and go, okay, that's exactly what I was working on.
Yeah.
It makes that recovery period a little bit easier for me.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, because I probably started. I don't know how many novels I get to a point, and I'm like, okay, I don't. Yeah, I got to back. I don't know where to take this from here, even though I know the ending.
Right.
It's just when do it like that. And then I have an idea, then I'll switch to that. So, do you use just Word? What do you use to track a spreadsheet? I mean, what do you? How do you track all your?
I just do I do a simple Word document, and I've
Mhm.
got columns in there, and so it'll be chapter 1, and it may be a sentence, it could be a
Mhm.
paragraph, and I've
Right.
had some outlines where it's kind of like the writing is coming to me at that moment, and so I'll just expand on it. And I've had a chapter outline that's gone 3-4 pages.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things where most of the time it's just telling me what's going to be happening in that chapter.
Right.
Other times I'll have a great thought or something I
Mhm.
know I definitely want to
Mhm.
include. And like I said, other times I'll start writing it and all of these little details will come in, and I'll end up, and there have been times where I've just like, wholesale taken
Mhm.
everything that I wrote in the progression and just bring it right over into my document and dump it and go, okay, done. I lost you there for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking about the wholesale of the. I guess you took the wholesale of your outline and wrote a chapter.
Right. And so I'll bring it right into my document and I'm done.
Wow, that's pretty good. Now, like when I write, I'll try to. I don't know if I go for a word count. I try to go for a thought, or play the whole thing out, play the whole scene out, and maybe start something else. I try not to go for word because then if you go for word, you don't make it. You're like,
Right.
But I'll set a deadline that I want on the book, and then I'll work back
Yeah.
from that,
Um,
and then I know how much wood I got to do.
with me, I have a general number that I'm looking for in
Mm-hmm.
there. But when it comes to the chapters, I tend not to over add things in there because I think it tends to get a little bit heavy. And
Right.
so I'll just let the chapter dictate itself to me. Ultimately, I'll meet my goal
Mm-hmm.
on the word count. But for individual chapters, I've had chapters that have been, maybe at most 100 words in there. And those
Okay.
words carry that chapter.
Right.
And so what I tend to do is like with Perfect Pawn, I had my main character is James Maguire, but then I have a love interest in there. So you have those two playing off of each other. And in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, it's almost kind of like, he said, she said type of thing.
Yeah.
But then as the book progresses and other characters have come in and there's an investigation going on,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have things from the bad guy's point of view.
Yeah.
So each of these chapters kind of go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find is readers tend to turn those pages a lot quicker because it's like, okay, we're done with him, but now we're going to this person and I
Okay.
got to read
You
that.
switch. You switch
Yeah.
back and forth.
So I really kind of look more at the pacing of the story and
Mm-hmm.
what's carrying it than that, so
That makes sense. I mean, that way you want to get to the next page. You want to get to the next event. What's the character doing? That makes perfect sense. So, what do you do in your spare time? Get yourself.
what's spare
Is there?
time?
Is there? I've noticed since I'm basically semi-retired, I had no spare. I
No.
figure out how to fill up every hour with
Yeah.
something, and
Yeah.
I just haven't figured out how not to do something. You got to be active. Maybe
That's
it's
the
a
funny thing.
generational thing. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the funny thing to me. It's like I had more time when I was working. Now I'm
Yeah,
retired and I've got my hands in all of these little different things. And it's like trying to find time at the end of the day. It's like, oh, well, the day's over already. So, yeah,
I know. I'm like, and I didn't get everything I want to get done. So,
yeah, you got to make
and the
lists.
wife's got a list of stuff. I mean, like, come
Right.
on. Then I got my list of stuff that I want to be able to do. So that's kind of crazy. Yeah, I don't know. It's good. So where can everybody get a hold of you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is andrewgnelson.org.
Yeah.
And from there, you can find links to social media and also links to where you can get my books. I'm on Amazon. I'm on in Barnes and Noble, Books a Million.
Mm.
I'm even told that I'm in Walmart. So, or you can get my
Awesome.
books through Walmart. My current book that I just wrote is a origin story on Maguire. and it's called Shadow Strike, and it takes place during his time when he was a U.S. Navy SEAL.
Okay.
So that story goes back in time.
Mm-hmm.
It relates to the current arc
Mm-hmm.
that's going on in the book, and that's kind of like bookended on either side. But then the story
Mm-hmm.
in the middle takes place when he was back in the Navy.
And that's a novella, or is that the full?
It's not as long as a full length book, but not
Okay.
as short as a novella. It's kind of somewhere in between.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I mean, a lot of authors are starting to write novellas,
Yes,
and is it because the younger generation's attention span is a lot less, so they're going to read something shorter, more concise, or maybe just to be able to get some thoughts out while you're doing something, you know, bigger. I guess I don't know.
I mean, I see the benefit of doing those shorter stories because you can
Mm-hmm.
actually write and put them out quicker on
Right.
it. Like I did with the cold case. They were these little stories that didn't merit a full length book,
Mm-hmm.
but had just enough in them that you covered all the steps. And they're
Right.
fun to write because you can get
Yeah.
them done really quick.
Right.
But I still write and love writing, full length novels
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's where you can really get into the meat of the
Oh
story.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
you definitely get into more detail and more backstory, and and then if you since you carry your characters forward, how much do you put in subsequent books about the characters, where the reader's not reading the same thing you put in the first book about the character because they already know the character.
right,
But some people pick up a series in the middle, but they have to know enough about the character to be able to say, okay, I get this, where
right.
this person's coming from or something. That's tough sometimes.
And what I actually started doing was in my books at the end of it, I gave the readers the chronological order that if they wanted the full story, because like I said, I mean, I grew up reading Joe Wambaugh.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had his police procedurals from, an LAPD perspective. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted to do when I was writing, give it from an
Right.
NYPD perspective.
Right.
But I also grew up reading, Tom Clancy and
Yeah.
Frank Herbert. And so you
Okay.
had these two authors that did this tremendous amount of world building with a lot of complicated characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where I write from. And
Right.
so in the books, while each of them has a standalone plot to them,
Mm-hmm.
there are also like a spider web of smaller subplots and character development. And so what I did was at the end of the book, I said, okay, if you want the full story and you want to know it from beginning to end,
Yeah.
here's the chronological order that you read these books in. And so readers can start from the
Yeah.
beginning and switch back and forth between series and not feel like they're missing anything
Mm-hmm.
because that world is all together.
Yeah, and you give them a roadmap.
Right.
It connects all the books, and how they want to read them is up to them. But yet they'll get all the information about the characters. Interesting. That's great, Andrew. I'm glad we finally got this thing done. It took
So it was a struggle, but we
it
succeeded.
was a struggle, and we're living in the 21st century where you know now we can't send a man to the moon anymore. But what we did, for falling behind technology wise, folks, we got to get it together or something like that. Well, great. So where can everybody get a hold of you?
Okay, go to my website, andrewgnelson.org. You can find me links to my social media there. And if you're looking to pick up the book, my books, you can go to Amazon, which is the easiest. They're also available in Barnes and Noble. And my suggestion is start with Perfect Pawn and just follow the chronological order. And I think you'll have an enjoyable read that'll carry you straight through the winter.
Excellent, and it is coming up Christmas time, folks. So they're perfect gifts. Who doesn't like a good crime thriller?
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. We'll talk
Thank
later.
you, Travis.
Yes, sir.